On board this aircraft lies a supply of blood, one blood type, the same type as the President of the United States. The bags are kept at a constant temperature and changed on a regular schedule, regardless of where the aircraft is heading or for how many hours. Whether crossing an ocean or flying for 40 minutes to a neighboring state, the blood is always on board. From this single detail, everything else grows. A fold-out operating table, 2 galleys on the lower deck, 87 telephones, and $200,000 for every hour in the air. And the most expensive presidential aircraft in existence has never once lifted the president. It sat for several years in the desert with its engines covered. It was originally built for a different country and for a company that no longer exists. Welcome to the channel for the richest of the rich.
Luxury life.
The room beneath the cockpit. In the nose of this aircraft there is a shower, a real one with a shower head and a drain at an altitude of 11 kilometers, which is approximately 6.8 miles. The water runs shorter than it does at home. The supply on board is finite. How much they take, the Air Force does not specify. The shower is part of the presidential suite. It occupies the very nose of the main deck, directly beneath the cockpit. This is the quietest point on the aircraft. It is the farthest from the engines, and vibration barely reaches here. An office, a bedroom, a bathroom, a dressing room, 4 rooms for 1 person. 2 sofas in the bedroom fold out into beds. The office is called the Oval Office in the Sky. It is filmed more than any other part of the aircraft. Signing documents, a telephone conversation, a meeting with advisors, nearly all the famous footage is taken here. It used to be different. Eisenhower flew in a propeller-driven aircraft named Columbine. Kennedy and Johnson flew on the Boeing 707. That aircraft, which brought Kennedy to Dallas in 1963, also had a presidential suite. Only it was smaller, noisier, and much closer to the rest of the cabin. The current one appeared in 1990, along with the transition to the 747. Nancy Reagan had a hand in the interior decoration. Military gray was replaced by light sandy tones, closer to a California palette than to a headquarters style. Furniture, fabrics, upholstery, everything was selected anew. The first to sleep in this suite was George H.W. Bush. The total floor area of the aircraft is approximately 370 square meters across 3 levels, which is about 3,982 square feet. A 5-room apartment with a speed of 1,000 kilometers per hour, about 620 miles per hour, and a ceiling of nearly 14 kilometers, approximately 8.7 miles. A flight to Asia is 15 hours or more. The president must step off the aircraft as though he just stepped out of the White House, not as though he spent 15 hours in a metal tube under pressure. That is what the shower is for. That is what the bed is for. And 40 meters behind, about 131 feet, on the lower deck, people are working at the same time. People who have been vetted just as thoroughly as the pilots. The buyer who does not give his name. Groceries for this aircraft are bought in ordinary supermarkets. An agent drives in, fills a cart, pays, and leaves. He does not give his name, nor the name of the person he is buying for. The store is a different one every time. The logic is simple. A supplier who does not know they are feeding the president cannot slip something specifically into his meal. From there, the groceries go downstairs to the 2 galleys. Military chefs do the cooking, and they undergo the same vetting as the flight crew. In one shift, both galleys produce about 100 portions. On a long flight, up to 2,000 dishes. Divide that by the 100 or so people on board, that is 20 meals per person. They are served on porcelain with the presidential seal embossed in gold. The same porcelain goes to the tail section, to the journalists. The plate is heavy and it rings with a dull sound, not like ordinary china. When a president changes, the kitchen retrains from scratch. The team learns the new president's tastes, consults with the White House chefs, and rewrites the menu so that the first meal on board is precisely what he would have ordered himself. It is not only the menu that changes. In 1990, George H.W. Bush banned broccoli from being served on board, publicly and without explanation. What exactly is eaten on this aircraft today cannot be found in open sources. The menu is not published, but this porcelain has a price, and in the tail of the aircraft, they know that price more precisely than anyone. The tail cabin. One seat in the tail costs more than a first-class flight across the ocean. On long-haul routes, noticeably more than $10,000. And it is not the government that pays for it, but the news organization. In the tail section sit 13 journalists. This is the White House press pool. News agencies, television networks, newspapers. The composition changes, the seats remain. The seats there resemble first class on a regular airliner. The same width, the same leather, the same food from the galleys below. They are billed at the full first class fare for that same route, without discounts and without refunds. Let us break it down into numbers. 13 seats at $10,000 each, that is $130,000 per flight. 1 hour of flight for this aircraft costs $200,000. That means all the press together does not even cover the first hour in the air. There is little freedom in this cabin. Walking around the aircraft is not allowed, filming is not permitted everywhere, and using personal telephones is prohibited on certain segments of the flight. The list of no filming zones is not published. In February 2025, the main rule changed. The composition of the pool began to be determined by the White House rather than by the Correspondents Association that had handled it for decades. The seats are the same. Who sits in them is now decided by a different person. However, the aircraft that these people board is not always the same one either. Two identical silhouettes. By the airport fence stands a person with a camera. A blue and white aircraft lands with the words United States of America along the fuselage. The person films and does not know the most important thing. Before them is one of two completely identical aircraft. There really are two of them. Tail numbers 28000 and 29000. The same machine, the same paint, the same interior. The only difference is the 4 digits on the vertical stabilizer, and from the ground they are nearly impossible to make out. Which of the two will fly tomorrow is decided by the Presidential Air Group at Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland. The decision depends on the maintenance schedule and the readiness of the aircraft. It is not made public. Sometimes both are launched into the air at once, one with the president, the other empty. They land at different airports or at the same one but with a time difference. Both aircraft were ordered by Ronald Reagan. The contract with Boeing was signed in the mid-1980s. The program cost approximately $325 million for both machines, and they were delivered only in 1990. By that time, Reagan had not been president for a year and a half. He never flew on his own aircraft even once. Since then, these two aircraft have carried 6 presidents in a row. They are 35 years old. A regular passenger 747 would have been retired long before that age. The average service life for civilian aircraft is about 25 years, and the platform was taken out of production as early as 1991. 35 years. That is the age at which an airliner is usually already sitting in the desert waiting to be scrapped. The refrigerator in the medical bay. In the medical bay, there is a fold-out operating table. What should be counted, however, is not that table, but the bags in the refrigerator. They are placed there before every departure. The blood type is the president's. The bay is the size of a large closet. Inside is a pharmacy for any scenario, oxygen and resuscitation equipment. A physician and a nurse fly on every flight, both as part of the crew, both on duty from takeoff to landing. For 100 people on board, 2 medical staff. The physician is no random doctor. The president's personal physician accompanies him both on the ground and in the air, a separate position in the White House. It was not always this way. On March 30th, 1981, Ronald Reagan was shot in Washington, a few minutes' drive from a hospital. The bullet passed near his heart, and he lost a great deal of blood. He was saved largely by the fact that an operating room was nearby. Since then, the White House has operated on a simple calculation. There may not be a hospital nearby. At an altitude of 11 kilometers, about 6.8 miles, there certainly will not be one. That is why the refrigerator always flies. Over the ocean, over the desert, over territory where it is impossible to land. Whether this supply has ever been used has not been reported. The bay, by the way, has no windows, like most of this aircraft. Rows of ovals on board. Some of the windows on this aircraft are painted on. From the outside, neat ovals run along the fuselage, just like on any 747. On the inside, behind some of them, there is a solid wall. This was not done for the view. A window is a break in the metal, and the metal fuselage acts as a Faraday cage, a continuous shield around the cabin. Glass in that shield is a hole. Where communications and encryption equipment is installed, holes are not left. The purpose of the shield is protection protection against electromagnetic pulse. A nuclear explosion at high altitude burns out electronics for hundreds of miles around. Wires melt, circuit boards fry, controls fail. A regular airliner after such an event would not take off. Everything depends on electronics, from the engines to the overhead lights. This aircraft is designed to take off. Exactly how is classified. Only the principle is known. Shielded conduits, protected wiring, duplication of every system. There is about 400 kilometers of wiring here, which is approximately 249 miles, nearly twice as much as on a civilian version of the same model. Stretch it out in one line, that would be the distance from Moscow to Nizhny Novgorod. The generators produce enough current to power 2,000 homes, and this reserve is intentional. The system must survive a power surge and the failure of any component. For the people inside, however, it all looks different. Over 70 people work without a single window. The light is artificial. The temperature is the same around the clock. Beyond the wall, there could be night over the Pacific Ocean or noon inside a hangar at Andrews Air Force Base. Impossible to tell by eye. Windows exist for the president, small ones with reinforced glass, and for the pilots. On the upper deck, immediately behind the cockpit, sit the communications operators. Access there is limited to a select few. Previously on the 707, everyone had windows. How many sections of the aircraft are built with no glazing at all has not been published. It is known, however, how long it takes for one person to be cleared to that upper deck. A vetting process that lasts a year and a half. Most people never make it onto this aircraft, not because they are poor flyers, but because the vetting process takes longer than some people serve in the military. The crew of the presidential aircraft is not assigned by a routine order. People are hand-picked from across the entire Air Force. Pilots, flight engineers, loadmasters, communications operators, flight attendants, technicians. Then begins a vetting process that takes from 12 to 18 months. It is conducted by the Counterintelligence and Security Agency of the Department of Defense. They look at everything: the entire biography, finances, relatives, acquaintances abroad, every move, every debt of investigators' work. Calculate that for the crew. On a single flight, approximately 26 people are involved. A year and a half for each. That is nearly 40 person-years of vetting just for one aircraft to take off once with the president on board. Those who pass are also interviewed. The final decision is made by the unit's leadership, and they can say no at the last step. After that, the person typically stays here for a long time. Many spend the rest of their career in this unit. 10 years, 20, sometimes more. That is precisely why the commanders know not the model, but the specific aircraft, its quirks, its repair history, the squeak of a particular panel that does not exist on the other identical one. How many people fail the vetting each year is not disclosed. And one of these people is responsible for ensuring that the aircraft needs nothing at all from the airport it flies into. What this aircraft needs from an airport: a runway, nothing else. A regular airliner after landing needs a whole yard of equipment: a boarding stairway, a tug, a generator, a water truck, a bus, baggage handlers. This aircraft needs none of those things. It brings everything with it. It starts with the boarding stairs. The presidential aircraft has two of its own, built in, one at the front, the other emerging directly from the belly of the aircraft. The steps fold into the fuselage and deploy in about a minute. The airport's mobile stairway does not come near this aircraft. Next, electricity. At the tail sits an auxiliary power unit, a small jet engine that powers the aircraft and maintains the air conditioning while the four main engines are off. On the ground, it hums continuously, a steady low tone, and by that sound, the aircraft can be heard before it is even visible from behind the hangar. External ground power is not connected. The aircraft purifies its own water using its own system. The baggage is loaded and unloaded by the loadmaster on the crew, the same one who is vetted for a year and a half. No outsider goes near the cargo hold door. The logic here is not about convenience. Every ground worker is another background check, another vetting, another gap. A tug that no one has driven up does not need to be inspected. A baggage handler who does not exist does not need to be cleared. That is why this aircraft can land almost anywhere: a military airfield in the mountains, a runway in a country without a proper airport, a site with no water and no electricity. One requirement: 3 kilometers, about 1.9 miles, of concrete under the 747. How much water and provisions they take for autonomous operations is officially not stated. There is, however, a scenario in which no runway would be needed at all. The boom at an altitude of 9 kilometers. In the tail of the tanker lies a man. He is not sitting, he is lying on his stomach face down in a narrow niche with a window. In front of him are control handles. Below him, a few dozen meters away, is the nose of the presidential aircraft. He guides the boom into a receiver about the size of a soup bowl. The tanker is a KC-135, or the newer KC-46. The distance between the aircraft ranges from 15 to 30 meters, about 49 to 98 feet. The altitude is about 9 kilometers, approximately 5.6 miles, and the speed is close to 800 kilometers per hour, roughly 500 miles per hour. Fuel flows at a rate of nearly 3 tons per minute, which is about 3.3 short tons per minute. That is roughly 70 automobile gas tanks in 60 seconds. The entire procedure takes from 15 to 30 minutes. A mistake is costly, a deviation in heading or speed, and the boom is torn from the receiver, or in the worst case, the two aircraft collide. The pilots qualified for this task practice it throughout their entire career. On ordinary trips, refueling is not necessary. The tanks hold about 200,000 liters of jet fuel, approximately 52,834 gallons, more than 3 rail tank cars. That is enough for 12,500 kilometers, about 7,767 miles without landing, from Washington to any European or Middle Eastern capital. It exists for a different scenario, for when landing is not possible. Airfields are inaccessible, the situation on the ground is dangerous, and the aircraft must remain aloft for as long as needed. The new aircraft will not have this capability at all. In-flight refueling has been abandoned in the replacement program. These are the very two aircraft that sat for several years under covers in the California desert and have still never carried anyone. The vehicle that never travels alone. The presidential limousine has a rule: it never goes out without a second, identical one. Two identical armored cars drive in the same motorcade, and from the outside, it is impossible to tell which one the passenger will enter. Both vehicles arrive before the president. They are carried by C-17 or C-5 military transport aircraft, and these aircraft land a day in advance, sometimes several days. One limousine, a backup, several security SUVs, a communications vehicle, a mobile command post. For a single trip to Europe or Asia, 4 to 6 cargo flights are required just for ground transport. The limousine itself is called the Beast. The body is from Cadillac. Everything else is from armored vehicles: steel, ceramic, multi-layered glass. The weight about 10 tons, which is approximately 22,000 pounds, as heavy as a city bus. The doors are roughly 20 centimeters thick, about 8 inches, and they close with a heavy, hollow thud that can be heard on any arrival recording. They cannot be opened from the inside without an agent. In the trunk, according to many reports, lies a supply of the president's blood type. The same principle as on the aircraft, only on 4 wheels. With the helicopter, it is even more complicated. Marine One is flown in pieces for long trips. The machine is disassembled, loaded onto a transport aircraft, reassembled on site, test flown, and placed on the landing pad. All of this is completed a day before the president's arrival. The Marine Corps crew, spare parts, and tools arrive in the country before the passenger himself. The equipment changes as well. The old Sea King, which carried presidents since the 1970s, is giving way to a new machine, the VH-92 Patriot. The replacement took years and suffered delays. Exactly what is carried in the mobile command post is not disclosed, but it is perfectly well known what this entire motorcade failed to provide on one occasion. That was the only time the presidential aircraft was declared not ready. The day they had to land. On September 11, 2001, the presidential aircraft could not do a simple thing: address the nation from the air. George W. Bush spent nearly the entire day on the aircraft. Florida, Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, and only then Washington. The television picture on board kept breaking up constantly. The people running the country at that moment saw what was happening worse than any viewer on a couch at home. To deliver an address, Bush had to land in Louisiana. Montana. The Air Force and the Secret Service considered that unacceptable. The aircraft was reconfigured. Now, for a live broadcast from altitude, all that is needed is a camera, a microphone, and the aircraft's own communication system. Communications, that is, 87 telephones. Secure and ordinary lines, satellite channels, high-frequency and very high-frequency radio stations, encrypted data transmission. For 100 passengers, nearly one device per person. They connect the aircraft to the White House Situation Room, to the Pentagon, to the National Military Command Center, and to Strategic Command. Beyond that begins the very purpose for which the aircraft was built. The president can order a nuclear strike directly from the aircraft, not from a bunker, not from the White House, from a seat at an altitude of 11 kilometers, about 6.8 miles. Right beside him, around the clock, is an officer carrying a briefcase. The briefcase is called the nuclear football. Its official name is longer, the President's Emergency Satchel. Inside are communications equipment and authentication codes. The officer never moves farther than arm's reach, whether on the ground or in the air. The scenario for which all of this was built sounds like this. The White House is destroyed. The Pentagon is destroyed. Ground command centers are silent. The president is in the air over the ocean, and the order goes from the aircraft to submarines to silos in Montana and to strategic bombers. This is a practice procedure, and regular exercises are held. The officers with the briefcase practice the authentication procedure. The communications operators practice the transmission protocol. The exercises themselves are classified. Exactly what was upgraded in the communication system after 2001 is also classified. The price of 1 second. $55 per second. That is what this aircraft costs in the air if you break down $200,000 per hour into seconds. While this sentence is being spoken, another $200 have just accrued. That $200,000 includes the fuel burned by 4 engines, the crew of 26, maintenance to military standards, and the upkeep of the air group at Andrews Air Force Base. At the bottom of the boarding stairs, you can smell that fuel from 10 yards away. The odor does not dissipate. It does not include nearly everything else: escort fighters, advanced security teams, operations at the destination airport, cargo aircraft carrying the motorcade vehicles. Let us break it down by route. Washington to Los Angeles, about 5 hours, $1 million one way. Round trip, more than $2 million. Europe, from $3 to $5 million just for the aircraft, before the first passenger has even checked into the hotel. This figure has grown. In reports from the late 2000s, it was noticeably lower. It crossed the 200,000 mark already in the 2020s. The argument about money has gone on for decades and does not depend on party. Obama was criticized for flights to Hawaii, Trump for Mar-a-Lago, Biden for Delaware. The auditors of the Government Accountability Office repeatedly demand the full cost of trips. The full cost is not published. The reason the argument is unsolvable is simply this: there is no alternative. The president flies only this way, and the price is the same whether he is flying to negotiations or on vacation. Since 1959, when Eisenhower first boarded a jet-powered presidential aircraft, this sum has been paid without interruption. Only the color of the aircraft changes, and that has happened only once. The sketch that was sent back. She did not like the first version. The aircraft that Kennedy inherited from his predecessor was painted in red, orange, and gold. Jacqueline Kennedy said that was how a king would fly, not a president of a republic. The sketch went back. The redesign was taken on by Raymond Loewy, an industrial designer, the creator of the Shell logo, the Lucky Strike Pack, and the interior of the Skylab space station. In 1962, he proposed a scheme that remains to this day. The lower fuselage is light ultramarine. The nose and the stripe along the side are a darker blue. Between them, a band of polished bare aluminum runs the entire length of the aircraft. In the sunlight, it gives a glint that can be seen for miles. On the tail, a flag. On the nose, the presidential seal. One detail in this scheme is almost invisible. The inscription United States of America is set in Caslon typeface, the same one used to print the first edition of the Constitution. Loewy chose it deliberately. There is nearly half a ton of paint on the aircraft, about 1,000 pounds. Primer, base, and clear coat, and it takes about 3,500 person-hours to apply. For one person working 8 hours a day, it would take more than a year to paint it alone. Half a ton? That is extra fuel on every flight and lost range. The weight was accepted. Recognition is worth more than fuel. The scheme survived 12 presidents and remained unchanged for over 60 years. In 2026, it changed. On June 19th at Andrews Air Force Base, an aircraft was shown in a different livery, dark blue and red instead of Kennedy's light blue. Exactly how many sketches Lowy showed Jacqueline Kennedy before she agreed is not precisely known, and the most famous photograph in that livery was taken not in the air, nor with the aircraft that flies today. Two aircraft that no longer fly. Dallas Love Field Airport, November 22, 1963. In the tail section of the presidential aircraft, the crew removes the seats and dismantles a partition. Otherwise, the coffin would not fit. At that same hour, in the cabin of that aircraft, Lyndon Johnson takes the oath of office. He is administered the oath by Judge Sarah Hughes, and beside her stands Jacqueline Kennedy in the same suit she was wearing in the motorcade. At the controls is Colonel James Swindle, Kennedy's personal pilot. The aircraft with tail number 26000 takes off and carries to Washington the new president and the body of the former one. It flew until 1998. Then it was sent to the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, where it stands today. The successor has a different story. The aircraft with tail number 27000 served from 1972 to 2001, 29 years and 7 presidents in a row. On August 9, 1974, it was flying over Missouri. On board was Richard Nixon, who had signed his resignation that morning. At noon Washington time, Gerald Ford took the oath, and the aircraft commander, Ralph Albertazzi, radioed the controller to change the call sign. The aircraft had taken off as Air Force One. From then on, it flew simply as 27000. The call sign belongs not to the machine, but to the person in the seat. That day, it could be heard on the controller's frequency. The aircraft was retired in 2001. What happened next is not what usually happens to aircraft. It was ferried to California, the fuselage was cut into sections, transported piece by piece to Simi Valley, and reassembled inside the pavilion of the Reagan Presidential Library. It stands there on supports, with its boarding stairs lowered, and it will never rise again. How long that conversion of the cabin in Dallas took was never recorded, and the two aircraft that will replace the current ones have not flown at all yet. The hangar in Texas. The first number in this story is not money. It is years of inactivity. 2 Boeing 748s, from which the new presidential aircraft are being built, were originally constructed for the Russian company Transaero. The company went bankrupt in 2015, and the aircraft were left without a buyer. They were moved to the desert in Southern California. The engines were covered, the windows were taped over, and they were left under the sun. They sat there for several years. In 2017, Boeing bought both machines and put them into the presidential program. Then came the costs. The original budget, $3.9 billion. The current estimate, $5.3 billion. The overrun is more than $1 billion, and that is not the end. The delivery date has slipped from 2024 to 2029 and beyond. $5.3 billion for 2 machines. That is $2.5 billion each. Convert that to flight hours at $200,000 per hour. That comes out to 26,000 hours. 3 years of continuous flight, without landing and without stopping. The work is being done in San Antonio, Texas. There they cut the skin, install reinforced panels, replace the wiring with electromagnetic pulse-protected systems, and install communications and defensive systems. There are not enough workers, supply chains are breaking, and part of the work is being redone. The main mistake was made earlier. On paper, Boeing took a fixed-price contract. Everything above the estimate is paid by the company, not the customer. The losses from the program have been disclosed by Boeing in quarterly reports for several years running, and the sums run into the billions. Company leadership later publicly admitted that they should not have taken this contract. In 2016, Donald Trump wrote that costs were spiraling out of control and threatened to cancel the order. The order was not canceled. The terms were renegotiated, but the flying must happen now. One of the 2 active aircraft regularly requires heavy maintenance. The aircraft is partially disassembled. Fatigue cracks and corrosion are hunted for. Every electrical and hydraulic system is inspected, and this takes not days, but months. All that time, the country flies on 1 machine out of 2. Both aircraft are 35 years old, and the replacement is at best by the end of the decade. In 2025, the United States accepted as a gift from Qatar a Boeing 748 worth approximately $400 million. The machine was converted for presidential missions and shown at Andrews Air Force Base on June 19, 2026, in a dark blue and red livery. The gift is still being debated. Lawyers argue about its constitutionality, critics about the ethics of a gift from a foreign government. How much the conversion itself cost has not been officially stated, and the two aircraft from the desert are still sitting in the hangar. The most expensive presidential aircraft in existence has never carried the president. It has never flown to Asia, nor to the Middle East. There is not a single photograph of it in the air with the seal on its nose. It was built for an airline of another country that went bankrupt before it could ever take delivery. Then it sat for several years in the desert with its engines covered and its windows taped over. There are two such machines, and both are in Texas. $5.3 billion have already been paid for them, and at the same time, the two aircraft from 1990 continue to fly, with a shower in the nose, with a blood refrigerator in the medical bay, with 87 telephones, and with half a ton of paint that was chosen in 1962. $55 per second. Write in the comments whatever you think about this and subscribe to the channel for the richest of the rich. This is about luxury, wealth, and the lives of the most influential people on the planet. Thank you for watching, and right now watch our previous episodes which have already appeared on your screen.